Season 4 of the Overwatch League is off to a great start. The last 4 weeks of the May Melee qualifiers plus the tournament has provided some incredible action along with surprises, heroic performances, and some crushing defeats of course. Let's take some time to reflect upon the lessons we have learned. Today we bring back the commonly requested One Thing I Learned About Every Team series, this time focusing on the 2021 May Melee. Because this video would be like 3 minutes long if I only focused on the 4 teams who made the tournament in Hawaii, I'm expanding my horizon. We're including all 3 qualifying weeks plus the knockouts to ensure that no team gets left out. If you're new to this series, or this channel for that matter, I think you'll pick up on how these types of videos work pretty quick. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. And how about we begin with the Eastern Conference teams? The LA Valiant. They are who we thought they were. Besides a few nice individual plays here and there, the Valiant widely played up to expectations, or I guess I should say their lack of expectations. If we're being real, very few fans had faith in them, and they showed exactly why. Not to sound harsh, but they stink. Who knew that scrambling to assemble a team a few months before the season starts while having minimal money to offer and having many players reject your contract offers would mean failure? Go figure. In all seriousness, the preseason outlook on them is true. This club would be happy just to win a game, and it's pretty clear why. One map victory in 4 games doesn't get you excited, and if they can't even take a map off the Charge, it's pretty obvious that they have a long way to go before they're ready to be taken seriously. The New York Excelsior. Don't always trust in the Scrim Bucks. I'm a firm believer that the NYXL are still a promising group who could make great strides month by month, but even I have to admit they're not off to the greatest start currently. Between the infusion of youth, star power, and Scrim results, I was riding a New York high. I thought I should try investing in Scrim results after everything that happened with the Valiant in Season 3. Maybe Scrim Bucks weren't just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. So I trust in this roster just for them to win 1 game, then get swept in the other 3. In their defense, they played 3 May Melee knockout round teams, but they still were disappointing nonetheless. Their team play has been a little off. The NYXL definitely put up better fights than people give them credit for in some of their losses, but you can only use that excuse to a certain extent given the results. Fighting spirit or not, they still did get swept 3 times. This team has a lot of work to do if they plan to live up to their potential. The Guangzhou Charge. You're a little worse than I thought you were. It feels weird making such a statement when I only had them 14th in my power rankings to begin with, but the Charge showed some rather weak performances during the qualifiers. I mentioned it last week when discussing their random coaching changes that happened, but it's not a good sign when your only map wins come against the Valiant. The Charge have some talented pieces. Realistically, they should have what it takes to be a bit more competitive than this. Choice A1, Kariv, and Krong, I think they're all promising pieces, but it's not enough. They need more of a collective team effort, and they have to figure some stuff out at Hitscan, which is clearly a problem for them. It is my hope that parting ways with a few of their coaches will help them get back on track. The Hangzhou Spark. An upward trend could be on the way. Technically, they did go 1-3 in the qualifiers, not to mention that their first week was a disaster. But week 3 was a completely different story. They didn't just get their first win, but they also took the Shanghai Dragons, aka a May Melee finalist, to a map 5. They figured something out. They truly flipped the script after making some coaching adjustments and giving more playtime to their rookie DPS player, Shy. The Spark were a completely different team with him in the starting lineup. He offered true levels of explosiveness on a fight-to-fight basis. Combine that with great play from MCD, Architect, and Gushwei, and suddenly you start feeling excited if you're a Spark fan. It's too early to say if this is what they needed to consistently play better, but this team has promise. If they can have multiple playmakers show up like this on a game-to-game basis, then perhaps the Spark could maintain that 5 spot in their division, or maybe even sneak up on some of the teams that are currently ahead of them. The Seoul Dynasty. Maybe this year can be different. Before I even explain my thought process, I should make it very clear that I'm still not 100% invested in Seoul. Their history as an inconsistent franchise scares me, not to mention that all of their wins were against the bottom 3 teams in the APAC standings during their qualifiers, but they're off to a pretty decent start regardless. It hasn't been perfect, but they did take care of business. Yeah, they failed to make the Final 4 of the tournament, but a 3-1 start is what you like to see. Again, I'm not entirely convinced given they beat 3 of the not-so-great teams in their conference, but that's still better than what I saw last year. They were letting these types of easy wins slip away from them time after time, so this is a good place to start, but they still need to elevate their play a little bit if they intend to go back to the grand finals and or make some more deep tournament runs. They went down fighting in both contests they lost, but they still did lose to good teams that they need to overcome eventually. The good thing though is that they have been consistently showing progress. They fixed mistakes from week to week, which is something we didn't get a lot of last year. Seoul are definitely a team to monitor moving forward. The Philadelphia Fusion. Everything is okay. I think. So yeah, it's a different year, but the results remain the same currently. The Fusion cannot win a tournament. That really does suck a lot, and I know it hurts all my Philly fans out there, but you still have 3 more chances plus the playoffs. Obviously, this is a problem that I'd like to see them resolve, but we're kind of used to this by now. What I more so wanted to focus on was their impressive start. They go down Funny Astro, Poco, EQO, and Shockwave early on, but still find a way to make it work. They signed veterans to compensate, and the new guys have not missed a beat. Toby and Rascal, though, oh man, they're at a different level. Each of them made some significant contributions on a week-to-week basis. It's like the Philly from last year never left, and I'm very impressed with how strong they looked out of the gates. If one fight goes differently, they beat the Dragons and make the tournament. They're very close. This team should be in the thick of it until the very end. The Chengdu Hunters. You're dangerous, but still aren't quite where you need to be. It goes without saying that the Hunters are off to a fantastic start in their 2021 campaign. Not only is this the best start in franchise history for them, but they managed to be relatively competitive throughout this entire 4-week period. Leave has been playing out of his mind, with rookies Gaga, Jimmy, Monk, and Nisha giving him fantastic backup. When you combine that with their unique playstyle, you have a very annoying opponent. The problem is they aren't quite there yet. They got their 3-0 win over Shanghai in week 1 and a solid win over Seoul, but they were unable to push either of their opponents from the weekend to their breaking point. They fought hard, but they just weren't clutch enough. That's the next step this team needs to make. They have the experience now, so there is no more we're just happy to be here mindset. They have to find a way to push themselves to the next level. The Shanghai Dragons. Never count them out. If I'm being honest, the Dragons disappointed me during their qualifiers. Getting rolled by Chengdu and nearly losing to the Spark made me believe they were not going to be getting out of the knockouts. I should have known better though. They woke up right when it mattered the most as usual, resulting in a May Melee Finals appearance for a 2nd year in a row. This team's resilience is very admirable. They have never missed the finals of a monthly tournament yet. Izayaki and Lip were wonderful throughout the entire weekend. Izayaki kept up with some great players that I would consider to be better than him usually, which is cool to see, but the main star of the show during the weekend was Lip. If you still thought of him as a Sombra one-trick, he certainly shut down that narrative. His Ash and McCree were as good as ever, but the real story was his Tracer. His team needed him to step up on that hero to match Tracer echo compositions of their opponents, and he did so to perfection. I myself never really imagined him as a Tracer player. It wasn't that he couldn't play it, I just grew so accustomed to Fleta playing that role, you know? But how many times was Lip absolutely decimating the enemy backline? He gave Dallas a ton of trouble in both meetings with how often he was killing Jexay and Fielder. Absolutely crazy stuff from Lip. But the thing is, Shanghai rarely maintained control in this tournament. With the exception of the losers finals, every other game they played from the knockouts and onward went 5 maps or more. I'm not sure if it's their typical tournament nerves kicking in or something entirely different, but either way, Shanghai played some uncomfortable nail-biters. They might be the greatest showmen in the league. You can always count on them to keep you entertained, but that's not a great sign on their end. Keep a watchful eye on Shanghai heading into June. That does it for the East. Now on to North America. The London Spitfire. You have a ton of room for improvement. This was not quite the start that London fans were hoping for. 0-4 in the qualifiers with the worst map differential in their region is a tough bit of truth to swallow. Quick disclaimer, their schedule was not easy at all. The only one that truly felt winnable on paper, at least in my book, was Boston, and they nearly made it happen. Hopefully they show better results once their schedule gets a bit easier down the road, but at the same time, you can't fully use their schedule as an excuse. They've been kind of meh out there regardless of their opponents. I was a little disappointed in their DPS in particular. They aren't putting in the amount of work I expected them to. It's not all their fault, but clearly they're failing to make a lot of individual plays. The aggressive style of Shax has not worked well early on. It is my hope that the Spitfire can get a bit of a boost when Sparker turns 18 later this month, because they need somebody new to come in ASAP and inspire the rest of the squad. The Vancouver Titans. You're playing as well as expected. No offense to any Vancouver fans in the audience, but it was hard to not see this coming. Their roster appeared to be bottom 3 on paper heading into this year, and they've lived up to that reputation so far. Even a team like Paris showed a slight edge over them. The Titans are not getting consistent contributions from anybody really. Fried Wiener's been relatively solid, but they need a lot more. Yeah, technically they did take a map in every single one of their games, but it felt to me like most of their opponents were not taking them seriously. Paris is obviously an exception to this, but everybody else was kind of messing around at times. I could be wrong here, but again, that's how I felt when watching their games. It'll be a miracle if they get a win anytime soon at the rate they're going. The Boston Uprising. There is plenty of room for improvement. The Uprising did not play nearly as well as I hoped they would. The teams they were supposed to lose to absolutely crushed them during week 2, but in my opinion, they did show some potential. The Justice did not prepare much for them in their 4-map showdown during week 3, and Boston was able to force the Justice to take them seriously as the game went on, and they managed to avoid a winless stage from that crazy London game that was a bit too close for my liking. It's clear they have a ton of work to do. This roster has been hot and cold. Consistency is an issue that could take some time to resolve. The coordination has to get better. But more importantly, I want to see more confidence out of this group. There were so many times where they felt so unsure of themselves. They'd commit ults in fights they were already winning, showing that they're kind of afraid. But deep down, I'm still a believer. They're fighting hard and learning every day. This group is young. There is limitless room for improvement. The Paris Eternal, you have clear-cut limitations. Getting through the bottom teams in this region is tough. Most of them are basically in the same position. Paris were anticipated to be one of the bottom teams in North America, and I think that's exactly what they've been. I gotta say though, in my eyes they have been the clear-cut most competitive team out of the bottom 4 of the NA standings, and I don't just mean that because of the map differential. It's by the slightest of margins, but still slightly better than expected nonetheless. But then again, I'm sure a lot of it yet again, kind of like with the Vancouver Titans, has to do with other teams not taking them super seriously. If they have any intentions of building upon their bright spots, the consistency has to improve. They'll look good in one map, then trash for the rest of the series. Maybe the right step starts with Neptuno leaving the team. He was not playing very well and was partially to blame for their shortcomings. Perhaps a new main support will give the Paris Eternal some needed life. The Atlanta Reign. New year? Same problem. I try not to be the I told you so kind of person when I can, but did they not suffer from the same problems I was worried about during the preseason? They have that one composition they're solid at, but then crumble when the game plan has to change. Let's call it how it is. If they're a bit better outside of Rush and their general decision making improves, they might beat Florida, and they surely could have avoided that reverse sweep against the Defiant. Maybe they even beat the Shock. You have this team pushing good competition hard, which is a promising sign. That was something Atlanta could not do to save their lives a lot of the time last year. There's reason to feel optimistic for that, but getting close is not enough. If you're not winning the big games, does it really matter all that much? They could easily make a knockout stage of a tournament if they improve their general coverage. I pray they figure something out. It would be such a waste of talent. Atlanta fans better pray the hero pools work in their favor, otherwise they could be in a lot of trouble. The LA Gladiators. There's plenty of time to win back the crowd. It was not an ideal start for the Glads. To only go 2-2 in their qualifiers and miss out on the knockout round is pretty disappointing. Many fans, including myself, felt very excited about this new and improved roster. They were expected to be in the running for every tournament, so they've already kind of failed to live up to expectations. But I'm not ready to write them out just yet. Judging a roster of this caliber off 4 games does not feel right. Sure, they had a rough go at the Shock in Dallas. But it's hard to feel bad about either of those games since Dallas played so well in the tournament, and the Shock, well, they're the Shock. They were completely fine in their other games too, so it appears that it's only the top tier teams that are a real problem right now. But of course, that's worrisome if you support the Gladiators because you're following a very similar narrative to last year. You beat the teams you're supposed to, but then lose to anybody relevant. The Glads cannot let that happen again this year. This roster is way too talented to be that much of a failure. But right now, they're basically in the Atlanta situation. They failed to adjust mid-game. The Shock ran some wacky stuff that caught them slipping, and then they basically never recovered after that. In the Dallas game, they simply could not get a read on the untraditional style of their opponents. These are the types of losses that have to make them stronger. If a roster like this one cannot figure it out, then clearly there are some problems that need to be addressed before it's too late. The Toronto Defiant. Your start may be misleading. I'm not going to say this is the case for certain, but there's a chance Toronto's 3-1 start leads to some poor judgment. They showed they can be clutch and that perhaps a top 10 finish in the league is possible, but they didn't really beat anybody spectacular so far. Their one impressive victory comes against the Reign, of course, who are considered to be around their skill level, but whenever they were challenged by a high-tier team, they got 3-0'd. I'm not a huge fan of the way they played in the London series either, despite coming away with the win. I feel like this roster is kind of underrated. Michelle and Neist have both been pleasant surprises that have given this team a nice boost, but as it currently stands, this team feels like one on the outside looking in. Very talented from top to bottom, but can't quite piece it together against the truly legit opponents. Hopefully this can change one day, but as of right now, in my opinion, that makes their 3-1 start a little overrated. The San Francisco Shock. This year might be your greatest challenge yet. Since they are the Shock, I have no doubt in my mind that at some point during this year, some sort of flip is going to get switched and they will dominate, and when that happens, we are screwed. But for the time being, we can safely say they are not invincible. Between them adjusting to their new players and other teams simply getting better, the Shock appear to have a challenging road to the finals. Teams like the Outlaws and Reign really tested them, and the Fuel gave them a serious wake-up call. The Shock simply cannot let pride get in the way any longer. They gotta take everybody seriously instead of focusing on individual teams they want to get revenge on. They simply have to take a step back and realize it's a long season. If you're a Shock fan, it is your hope that early elimination lights a fire under them. It was supposed to be them going to Hawaii. People are going to be doubting them now, and that means Angry Shock could be making a full-time return heading into the next round of qualifiers. But for now, we can consider them human. The Houston Outlaws. Doubting you was a big mistake. For me personally, they were 1000% the biggest surprise of the entire May Melee qualifier. My doubts were very up there in terms of all of the YouTube channels out there, and I mean, I literally put London over them for crying out loud. I let the noise about Jungkook and Piggy get to me. I bought into the early season scrimbucks a little too much. Obviously, their Reinhardt Diva was their main selling point, but they low-key looked fine on just about everything else as well. But it's not just the tank line that I was very wrong about, because I expected Crimzo and Juby to be an average duo, but they were honestly one of the stronger support lines in the league. I don't know about top 5 or anything like that, but firmly in the top half of the league for sure. Even Happy has played better than I thought to a certain extent. He's been a true superstar next to Dante while being very consistent in just about every game. The fact that the Outlaws sit so high up in the standings makes me look like a pretty big clown. I did nothing but doubt them all offseason, and here they are now, shutting me up until further notice. The Outlaws are, dare I say, a solid team? The question is, though, can they keep this up? If the upcoming hero pools end up eliminating rush comps, let's say, can they still play at this high of a level? I'm not entirely certain. I definitely have a lot more confidence in them than I used to, but nothing is guaranteed in this league. The Outlaws have never exactly been known for consistency if you look back at history. If they output another solid qualifier heading into June, though, then it's time for me to fully admit they are very legit. The Washington Justice. You are more than capable of being a threat. The Justice came up short of my expectations in terms of making the May Melee Final Four, but they were everything I hoped they would be during the qualifiers. There were questions about their supports, and so far they've been getting the job done. I've especially been impressed with Bebe, who seems to be thriving under this new system. Rookies Mag and Assassin have also shown some pretty good performances. Everyone seems very capable of playing well on a fair amount of heroes individually, but if we're being honest, that crushing loss to Florida was an eye-opener. They aren't well versed enough at Rush. Their double bubble, it's incredibly clean, but the meta is in a place where so many different comps are going to be viable, and if you can't play the most optimal comp for the situation you're in, then you're going to fall short. All you have to do is look at the Reign in that regard, but seriously, Florida bullied them. I mean, it was scary. If the Justice can work out that versatility factor though, they should be in great shape, and I'm confident they figure it out too, because there's way too much to like about this team. The coaching, the superstars, the talented young rookies, it makes me believe they're going to learn fast. The Justice are not going anywhere anytime soon. But for now, they are not untouchable. The Florida Mayhem. We don't have to worry about OG. It goes without saying that OG was one of the biggest question marks on the Mayhem heading into 2021. He'd been in the downward trend for quite a bit, and it kind of felt like Florida settled for him after being unable to acquire any of the top main tanks in free agency. It wasn't to say that he couldn't be successful, it is more that he had a lot of challenges to overcome. But then he comes in right away and immediately shows that this is the right system for him. I had faith in Kuki to help OG maybe be serviceable, perhaps like a high B tier player at best, but the way he's been performing goes far beyond any of my greatest expectations because he has been a true playmaker. He was the one major hole that could have held this team back, but he's growing at an even faster rate than his coach anticipated. A lot of people are saying he is a top main tank in the league right now, and I agree. Fearless is my clear-cut number 1, but he's right up there in my top 5 without a doubt right now. The Mayhem are deadly once again, and they did very well in the tournament. Now they just kind of have to find a way to keep this up. If they could possibly make it back to Hawaii one more time, I would be feeling extremely optimistic about this squad come playoff time. If the meta can stay in a place like this by the time playoffs roll around, then Florida might go pretty far. If Yaki, OG, and those boys play at this level, anything is possible. The Dallas Fuel. You don't need to follow the norm to win. This is by far the biggest lesson I learned from the last 4 weeks. I was excited about Dallas this year, but my confidence in them took a major hit, as I do, and I'm sure many of you were in the same mindset that I was. Dallas are good, but they can't compete at the highest level without a hit scan. How can they compete without an elite sniper or McCree player? Well, it turns out it's not as hard as I thought it would be. When you have the right talent and coaching, you adapt. The Fuel implemented their own unique style. Instead of worrying about what other people were doing, they focused on themselves. They played up to their strengths. They utilized a fast pace that forced other teams to match them, instead of playing the heroes that Dallas quote-unquote couldn't play. They found a way to make it work. They were competitive in every single game they played. Their play became so clean and so decisive that they completely won me over by the time we got to the Final Four. They're showing that there's other ways to win besides playing what you'd consider the standard. When you can embrace your own style that truly works for you, sometimes the stuff that goes around you is irrelevant. When you can play that well as a team, anything is possible because everybody played a part in this amazing run. You have Jexay with his fiery passion and desire to win, Fielders amazing Ana and Baptiste, Hanbin being extremely consistent, and then of course Doha's explosive Echo. I really gotta give it up to Fearless and Sparkle in particular though, because they were heroes from start to finish. As the fan base has been saying as of late, Fearless is basically the protagonist of the league. The amazing story of this dude continues. From 0-40 to the only person to win the May Melee twice, and a guy who has been a top main tank in the league 2 years running. This guy is a winner. Wherever he goes, success follows. His overall play at main tank is some of the most inspirational heroics you'll ever see. There is no way this team gets this far without him. Forget best main tank. He genuinely might be the best player on the planet. At the very least, he's the best tank player in the league right now, and there's no debating it. Thinking about it from the side of Sparkle, he continues to prove why he has some of the highest potential in league history. I had no confidence in Sparkle's Tracer at the start of the year, but he showed me that all he really needed was some time and practice, because he's kind of a beast on her now. This is exactly why Rush said that Dallas did not need a Tracer specialist. Sparkle is a flex god, so why bother? Absolutely phenomenal stuff from this guy. Dallas played so wonderfully, and I give them a lot of credit. From sticking to one support lineup and improving a lot in a short amount of time, to figuring out creative ways to win, they have become one of my favorite teams to watch. Congrats to the Dallas Fuel on a well-deserved tournament victory. Nobody can take this away from them. They defied all the odds and disadvantages. They won without a hit scan, and they beat a lot of good teams to get here. Taking down the Shock, Outlaws, Hunters, and Dragons twice is unreal. Nobody can say they got lucky. They deserve this. So how are we feeling, Dallas fans? It's finally your time. The cycle of misery has been broken. After 4 years of nonstop pain, suffering, and drama, the boys in blue finally got it done. Every year before this one was brutal for the most part. It was full of failure and mediocrity, but no more. You are now forever a part of history in a good way rather than one where you get made fun of. You are no longer cursed. No matter what happens from here on out, you'll always have this moment to look back on. But I get the feeling this team won't be going anywhere anytime soon. And with that said, that wraps it up. That is one thing I learned about every team from the 2021 May Melee. What did you think of this event? And what are some things that you learned that I didn't mention in this video? Let me know down in the comment section. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all of my most recent videos. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.